Each and every day, enjoy the Simple Six menu at Subway, an entire made-for-you meal featuring one of 6 inch sandwiches like the Italian BMT or Black Forest ham, with any bag of chips and a 21-ounce drink, all for only $6. Subway. Eat fresh.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't
The
care.
BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the Sports Guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. It's Monday morning here on the West Coast. It's Monday afternoon on the East Coast, and they are preparing for Hurricane Sandy. Good luck to everybody out there. Hopefully you will be able to hear this, and hopefully everybody won't get annihilated with all the power outages, all that stuff. On the phone right now in New York, Grantland's NBA columnist, Zach Lowe. Zach, how you hanging in?
We're doing all right so far. I live outside the most severe evacuation zones, so I just hope all those people are okay and their places are okay, and we just ride it out like we rode out Hurricane Irene.
We were going to have you on tomorrow to talk about the James Harden podcast, but because we have no idea to how long this power thing is going to go and what the damage is going to be, we're going to jump the gun. James Harden, stunningly traded on Saturday night. Kind of came out of nowhere in some degrees, but on the other hand, on Friday, it did, for the first time, there seemed to be some inklings that this might be headed this way. How surprised were you?
I mean, I was surprised in that, it was Saturday night, and I certainly wasn't planning on thinking hard about the NBA at Saturday at midnight, and I just sort of,
Right.
and I just sort of assumed that teams will take sort of, in general, with an asset of this level, that you take sort of the safest route possible. And we talked about how this is like borderline unprecedented for a team that is a real title contender to take a step back like this. And so it's surprising in that regard. But, I had heard, I was surprised for the last month or two how many people around the league, not Thunder people, but how many people around the league would sort of warn me, like, I think there's a better than zero chance that they do this soon. Not a great chance, but it's like not off the table.
Yeah.
So I wasn't shocked. The timing surprised me, but and again, I'm surprised, but I'm not like blown away surprised.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff going on here. One of the things that I thought was really unfair was, and this happens on Twitter, and this is one of the problems on Twitter, is that people are trying to write in 140 characters, and they kind of jump to conclusions, stuff like that. James Harden did not demand a trade. James Harden was traded, right? James Harden was negotiating with Oklahoma City. Oklahoma City offered him one price. Harden and his agent wanted another price. And then Oklahoma City just said, all right, fine, we're trading you. So I think for people to say, here's James Harden, he got greedy. I don't think he got greedy. He's worth what he's worth, and he's got to be one of the top 20 players in the league right now. He deserves to be paid at least in that vicinity. And, in my opinion, 4 years, $53 million would have been a bargain for him. What did you think?
This is actually sort of the least interesting part of this for me, is this this idea that either side is being unethical somehow.
Yeah.
I mean, both of them made business decisions. They're allowed to make those business decisions. And,
Agreed.
The interesting thing to me is, why is 4 and 54 or 4 and 53 not a financial deal breaker, but 4 and 60 is? I mean, obviously the luxury tax compounds that, $6 million difference by 3 or 4 times probably. And that does make a significant difference, but it would have been not equally, but I mean, the Thunder are still looking at payrolls in the $90 to $95 million range when you factor in the tax, and whatever they do, they still have to pay Perkins' salary. They're still looking at payrolls that are that high, or payroll bills anyway, that are that high if they keep Harden at 54 million over 4 years and amnesty Perkins or whatever. I mean, that's still way $20 million over the luxury tax that gets worse after this season. So it's interesting to me that was not a deal breaker, but a few $1 million higher was. But yeah, I mean, James Harden can do whatever he wants. I mean, it's not for us to judge what he would do, and I wonder how many people who are making that judgment would turn down significantly more money to stay at their current job out of loyalty.
Well, there are two other points piling on your point. One, from what I understand, Harden and his agent wanted a trade kicker. So, all right, we'll take a little less, but if for some reason we're in a situation like what Rajon Rondo was in last year, where he took a discount with Boston and then they tried to use that discount as a trade asset for Chris Paul, they were protected. And if Oklahoma City didn't want to put that trade kicker in there, that's kind of on them. I think Harden is justified saying, all right, I'll take a little less, but if you trade me, I should be able to make some up on the back end. The other thing is, I think Presti actually made a tactical error. Reading the papers today, it's pretty clear that he was almost a little too upfront with Harden. He was like, if you don't take this, we're going to trade you to Houston. So now if I'm Harden and I'm talking about this with my agent, and I'm thinking, all right, if I go to Houston hasn't used their 5-year max on anybody yet. So now I'm looking at, instead of 4 years, $53 million, I could get 5 years, $78 million from Houston. Yeah, that sounds better. That's $25 million more. Like, of course he's going to want to go to Houston at that point. Did you feel like Presti made a mistake telling him that?
I don't know. I mean, I sort of give him credit for his honesty and sort of being upfront with what the financial limitations were and all of that. And, I haven't heard that about the trade kicker like you have. But again, as I said, that's a business decision. If they didn't want to do that, that's on them. I mean, that's part of how you negotiate. And yeah, the fifth year is sort of the CBA story, the collective bargaining agreement story, isn't necessarily the luxury tax or woe is me for the small market teams. It's just those little rules like that they already used their 5-year extension on Russell Westbrook, so they don't have it left in the tank for Harden, and that hurts in that regard and sort of inflates the difference between what the Thunder could offer and what the Rockets can offer now. But, I mean, those are all business choices. You make them, you pay the price.
And I think Harden, in his mind, had sacrificed a lot already. He's coming off the bench, even though, he's an Olympian. He's one of the best 20 players in the league, and definitely one of the best under 25 players in the league. So he sacrificed that. He sacrificed minutes. He sacrificed shots. Now he's on a team where he can't even get the 5-year whatever, because Durant and Westbrook have already claimed those 5-year spots on just about any other team in the league. He gets that 5-year. So I think at that point, if I'm Harden, I'm thinking, well, I've already given up all this other stuff. Can I at least get the 4 years 60? Like, can you at least show me that you respect me in that degree? And I think what's interesting is it's pretty clear that Oklahoma City didn't feel like he was a 4-year, $60 million guy. I mean, there definitely did seem like there was a little bit of a Bill Belichick type, here's your value, I'm not going $1 over that value, and if you don't agree, I'm trading you. In your opinion, was he a 4-year, $60 million guy?
Well, I mean, I think I do think that the Thunder had that question, and a lot of people around the league have that question. There's a huge division of opinion about whether he is, and I think it's not just, I talked about why did they draw that line in the sand? Why is it just that few $1 million that is the do or die line? And I think it's actually not just that. It's the few $1 million and the sort of lingering uncertainty that he's really a number one option. Look, he's a max player because the market will pay him a max contract, and I think that he will. It's sort of like, is it really relevant? Like, he's going to be a very, very good player, one of the top 15 to 20 guys in the league. Is he going to be as good without Durant and Westbrook around to take up some attention? I don't know, but he's going to be so good that if he doesn't live up to a $15, $16 million contract, he'll live up to a $13, $14 million contract. And once you start sort of arguing about those values, you're missing the forest for the trees.
And Bob Voulgaris is coming on later. He made a good point on Twitter that I totally agreed with. Like, it doesn't matter if Harden is quote unquote a max player or not. It matters what he would get on the market, and 12 teams in a heartbeat would pay him the max to have James Harden in their team. And if you're going to judge it by what's somebody quote unquote worth, then LeBron James should be worth $60 million a year. Like, you can't just say, well, what's that guy worth? Because worth is all relative. And I think if you were the Lakers and you could have LeBron James and pay him $60 million a year, you probably would. So, I just think the bottom line is they had 3 of the best 20 players in the league, and now they're rolling the dice with their title chances this year with Kevin Martin and Jeremy Lamb, which Jeremy Lamb a rookie. Kevin Martin, has he even played in a playoff game? I'm trying to remember. Has he played in a playoff game?
I believe, yes. He was on some of the Kings teams that were at the tail end of like the Kings' relevancy.
So
I don't think he played a huge number of minutes, but
talk about the basketball implications of dropping from all the stuff that James Harden did for Oklahoma City, and he did so much subtle stuff for them, especially like anytime Westbrook was in a little bit of an offensive funk, or just those moments when Oklahoma City, their offense just wasn't working. All of a sudden Harden could just get to the rim whenever he wanted. Now you have Kevin Martin, who likes coming off screens. How do you feel like this Oklahoma City offense is going to work now?
Well, that's what's so fascinating about this trade is that Harden is so damn good, but he also comes off the bench. And he comes off the bench because his skills are sort of slightly redundant with the other 2 guys. And so they need him to carry these second units that otherwise wouldn't be able to score any points. And they made but ideally you want all of them on the court at once, and the Thunder were like off the charts offensively when they had all those guys on the court. But they were still sort of learning how to use each other, and there would be times when Harden would just sort of float around on the perimeter while Westbrook and Durant were doing their thing, and it wasn't ideal. So, it's a really interesting thought exercise because, you could see Sam Presti thinking, is there a middle ground here that I can take where because of our unique situation with these other 2 great perimeter players, we lose another great perimeter player but don't drop off all that much? And by that I mean, in a big game now, it's going to be really hard for him to have any time at all when both Westbrook and Durant are on the bench. I think he's probably going to need to stagger their minutes because Kevin Martin cannot carry an offense as a primary ball handler nearly at all. I mean, he's not in James Harden's world in that degree, and so you can't just sort of hand Kevin Martin the keys to the second unit offense. I don't even think with Eric Maynor back you can do that. So he's going to have to stagger his minutes differently and stagger his rotations differently. But if Maynor's healthy and ready to go, if Perry Jones is healthy and ready to contribute, I think that's workable. But clearly there are going to be times where Westbrook is in a funk, or Durant is being guarded by LeBron or Andre Iguodala or whatever, that not having that third guy is going to hurt. And there's no question they've gone from sort of favorite / co-favorite whatever to sort of on the fringes behind the Heat and then the Lakers, and we go from there.
And you mentioned the redundancy. Now, I would flip that around. I would say I thought that was what made that team special, was the fact that there was never really a drop-off for them offensively. There was never a point of a game where they didn't have somebody at the floor who could get at least a decent shot when he wanted to. And now it just puts so much pressure. To me, the pressure is now on Westbrook and what kind of player he is going to be, what he is, which we're still trying to figure out what he is. He's not totally a point guard. I'm more of a fan than most, I think. I wrote a column about the 90% theory. I think 90% of the stuff that he brings to the table is fantastic, and you just have to learn how to live with the other 10%. But now, when he's in those little funks, when he's in one of those games where he's 6 for 21, and that's when Harden would come in and they could kind of run the offense through Harden, they're not going to be able to do that anymore. And I just think they're worse. It's not rocket science saying that, but I was getting emails from my friends who root for the Lakers. The fact that they were delighted by this trade is a bad sign for Oklahoma City. The Laker fans were terrified of James Harden, right? And now he's just off the team.
Yeah, they're worse. What's interesting about them is that their 3 sort of holdover stars now, if you count Ibaka, are so young that they're all going to get better in those sort of little ways that are hard to notice. So if 90% of what Westbrook did last year was good, is 94% of it good this year? And does that 4% begin to chip away at what you lose with Harden? But yeah, I mean, they're going to be worse, and they have to get better defensively, Harden aside, and we have to see them prove that. But there's no question that they're worse, and that the other guys have more pressure on them. And it's interesting to think about, right? Because if you start ranking players, Durant is either the second or third best guy in the league,
yeah.
And Russell Westbrook is going to fall somewhere between probably 8 and 12. If you've got 2 of the top 12 players in the league and one is number 2 or number 3, you should still be able to be pretty damn good every single season and contend for a title, right?
Yes. And that's kind of why I wanted to see them give this team one more chance. We didn't even talk about Presti explained why he didn't go this route, and I just disagree with the conclusion he came to. And he's a better GM than I'll ever be, and I think he's smarter about basketball than I'll ever be. I just disagree in this specific case. He was saying that he didn't want to roll it over until next summer, because what they could have done is just, all right, fine, James, we're not going to agree to an extension. Let's agree to continue this next summer. And then made a run with this year's team. And had they done that, all of a sudden now they have James Harden at this phenomenal price, right? He's making $5 million a year. He's like the 20th best player in the league. He couldn't be more of a bargain. And that's a real asset to have for this specific season. So you make one run at the title, then you figure it out next summer. Now, Presti said he didn't want to do that. He didn't want it hanging over the team. He felt like they wouldn't be able to get as much in a trade because it was worth more to Houston to try to trade for him now because they could give him 5 years. I still would rather take the crack at going for the title when you think about how close they were last year. What would you have done?
I probably would have gone for the title, only because you just don't get these chances. I mean, this is a once in a decade, once every 2 decades chance. I mean, the line of being a contender is so thin, and it's so easy to fall below that line that I think you got to take your chances when you get there. Especially since, as you say, they would have been in control of the situation over the summer, and this isn't a case where there could be poison pill offers that would complicate things, because a max contract is a max contract. The inconveniences are minor, at worst, and the trade market is still going to be there. I mean, Harden's not going to lose trade value unless he has a horrible season, and that's not going to happen. And the sort of, centerpiece player that they would want in this kind of trade, they get a year to look at Brad Beal, or they get a year to look at Valanciunas, or they get a year to look at these other guys who they wanted and couldn't get. I don't think so. But it's that's the kind of thing that's hard to judge from the outside, right? Presti knows the vibe of that locker room. He knows what his coach is telling him. He knows sort of internally what is best for the team, and you got to sort of concede that he knows better on this one. But yeah, in an ideal world, I'm taking another run.
I talked to Daryl Morey, the Houston GM, on Saturday night, and he said something that I thought was interesting. I hope I'm not betraying his confidence. I was just asking him, like, why do you think Oklahoma City didn't just play this out? I mean, you would have made this same trade in some form next summer. And he said, I think Sam just really liked the deal, which made me think, maybe we're not seeing something with Jeremy Lamb? Maybe they think maybe they just love Jeremy Lamb and think he's like the perfect guy to put on that team. I have to confess, I didn't see him that much in college. When he went 12th, I felt like that was about the right spot for him. What are you hearing about Jeremy Lamb?
I didn't see him that much in college either, so I'm not the best guy to, give my opinion on a guy that we've seen in summer league, basically from the NBA standpoint. But people are mixed on him. There are people who think he's going to be a very nice player, not a star, but a very nice second or third banana offensively with great athleticism and good skill and a good stroke. And there are people who are not sold on him as a starter on a good team, and that's sort of the typical. I mean, for that pick range, that's typical. You don't necessarily get a starter at that range of the draft. And so, I don't think Jeremy Lamb, Sam may have liked the deal, Presti may have liked the deal, but he liked it because he thought it was the best he could get and not because he thought it was a great deal. I think he had higher ambitions, and this was where it ended up.
Yeah, see, I feel like they could have gotten a comparable deal next summer and tried to win this year's title before they did it. Hey, for instance, people have been speculating about who might have been on the table other than this Houston trade. And I'm sure from Houston's perspective, they're trying to make the best trade they can make because they're worried somebody might trump them. The guy I kept looking at was Klay Thompson on Golden State, because that's somebody that I feel like could have really helped Oklahoma City this year, and then maybe they're not quite as good as Harden, but he gives them a little bit something a little bit different than what Harden does, but maybe not necessarily worse. And I feel like he's getting better. And then if you're Golden State, you get Harden. He's a franchise guy. Your fans know who that is. They seem like a team that's, they're always kind of worried about what the public perception is. Harden plays into that. Oh, here we go. Here's a famous guy. I really wonder if that trade was ever on the table, and if it was, who said no? Who says no to that trade?
Well, they looked at Klay Thompson. I know that. I don't know how serious it got, but I mean, they're not stupid. They asked about Klay Thompson, and they tried to work a deal, at least in a preliminary stage for him, because he's absolutely the perfect guy to get in this kind of trade. He's only in his second year, so you've got him cheap for 3 more years. He's one of the best shooters in the world already, and Oklahoma City sort of quietly has a spacing problem when Harden is not on the floor, because Westbrook's not a great three-point shooter, and Tapos Cephalosha you don't have to guard, and they're big guys. Ibaka's a good shooter, but the other guys have no range at all. Well, Collison now and then, but you get the point. And I think Thompson would have been perfect, but the problem is the Warriors have no expiring contracts of any size to sort of make the cap workable in a way that at this moment, or even a year from now, would work financially for the Thunder. They took on all these guys, Richard Jefferson, and they didn't amnesty Biedrins, and they have all these contracts that are big money through 2014. And so you would have had to either send Curry along, who's going to be an expensive guy anyway, a year from now, and they don't necessarily want to give him up, or find a third team, and then it just gets very complicated. Golden State would have been, I think, a much better contender for Harden had their contracts been a little bit different, but Thompson still would have worked just straight up, I think, or you can find the flotsam to make it work, and I don't know who said no to that, but certainly they thought about it.
Thompson would have worked, I think, pretty close to straight up with Harden, just because of I think they might have had to throw in one more guy, but it's interesting. Now we're going deep dive NBA nerddom, but they made that Steven Jackson Richard Jefferson swap last year and took on an extra year Richard Jefferson's contract. Steven Jackson's expiring this year. Had they not made that trade, that would have been your expiring contract, and that was a trade nobody liked when they did it. But the other one that I think nobody mentioned, but I'm surprised Minnesota didn't get involved with Harden. Maybe they did. Maybe they just didn't have it. But I had always wondered about a Harden and Ibaka for Kevin Love type monster deal. Like, who would say no to that? But I guess with Kevin Love's broken hand, maybe that wasn't on the table. But I'm surprised Minnesota didn't, because they had Derek Williams. They have some other pieces. Maybe they were involved too. I
haven't heard them, and Ibaka can't be traded, I don't think, till December 15th or. There's
because
some trade,
you're right.
There's
right.
some trade, but that's temporary. But Minnesota, I haven't heard them, and I think they view Kevin Love as probably borderline untouchable, even though they only locked him up for 3 years.
Would you have kept Harden or Ibaka if you could only pick one?
That's the interesting meta story here, is that they've made a bet that 2 wings and a big guy is better than 3 wings and whatever big guys you can get for cheap money, and it's sort of NBA conventional wisdom to bet that way, right? I mean, that you need a really good big guy defensively and someone who's going to develop hopefully more into an offensive threat to just diversify things a little bit. Sort of question one is Westbrook or Harden, and I actually do think Westbrook is a better player now and will continue to be a better player. And so if that decision is made, then I would, gun to my head, probably take Ibaka, although I think that he is overrated. I just think his athleticism is so stunning and his potential is so huge to be a difference maker on defense that given Westbrook and Durant already being there, that I would take Ibaka, knowing I'm not taking the guy who's actually better now.
I would have kept all 4 and just tried it out.
You didn't give me that choice.
I'm just saying, I would have kept all 4. I mean, I have it on very good authority from a couple different people that Oklahoma City, the 2 figures I've heard are either $30 million or $35 million for what they made profit last year, right? I'm not even saying, we're talking a shortened season, and they made that much money. Now, it would have been less this year because now they're paying Ibaka, their salaries went up, stuff like that, but this is a team that over the last 4 years probably made close to $100 million. And now, because they were faced with the potential of maybe not being in the black for 1 year, Really does seem to me like they panicked. And as we talked about earlier, and we talked about this in the podcast a couple weeks ago, it's just never happened before where a team has chosen the financial bottom line over titles. I mean, there was the Joe Johnson Phoenix situation is the closest we've come, but Joe Johnson left. He signed with Atlanta. Like, Phoenix was offering him contracts. He just didn't want to stay. This is a totally different situation. Let's talk Houston really quickly. I think they're a playoff team now. Do you agree?
No.
No.
No. Do you want me to explain?
Yes.
First, the West is loaded, and I will concede that with the injuries to Love, Dirk, and whatever the hell is going on with Bogut, that there is going to be an opening at the back. Not necessarily an open spot, but there's more of an opportunity for someone to sort of sneak in to the conversation for both the 7th and 8th seeds. And Houston, look, I'm a huge Asik guy. I think he's going to play up to that contract and be a huge difference maker. I like Lynn, Harden, great. Here's my thought on why they're not a playoff team. A, they're just going to play too many young guys who have no NBA experience, or very little, including Lynn. And when you start piling up so many of those guys in your rotation, it's just hard to win. And the second thing is, although Harden makes them better now, they dealt from a position that they already had filled with a decent NBA player and filled it with a better NBA player. They didn't sort of fill a void anywhere on the roster. I mean, I like that team, and I like Chandler Parsons a lot. He may have the best contract in the entire NBA, by the way.
Yeah.
But I just think they're going to be playing too many inexperienced guys. They'll be good. They could push 35, 38 wins, but I think it's a stretch to see them in the playoffs.
Here's my case. I think that 8 seed is wide open because Dallas, I think, falls off. Minnesota, I think, falls off because of the Kevin Love injury. I actually had Portland penciled into that 8 spot just because I thought it was going to be somebody weird. It's probably going to take 39, 40 wins to get that 8 spot. And when you look at what Houston has, assuming Jeremy Lin's knee is healthy, and we have not, nobody really feels that good about Jeremy Lin's knee. It just doesn't seem that comfortable. But if he can rally back a little bit, now you have 2 guys who can get to the rim, and then on top of it you have Asik, who House and I called Asik on our podcast last week for an hour. Asik, who really looks like he's coming into his own as a rebounding blocks guy. It's not a bad foundation. Terrence Jones looked really good in the preseason. So, and then you have Parsons. Like, they have pieces. So I don't know. I also think Harden's gonna have a little FU going this year. I really think he's gonna. I think if we're talking fantasy sleepers, he's got to be at the top of the list for me, and Asik as well. All right. So if Houston doesn't make the playoffs, then who do you have going in that spot?
It's a tough call. Right now, I would say Minnesota, just because I think they have a really great coach. Love will be back fairly early in the season, so that if they can just sort of scrape to a 500 record without him, that they'll be in good shape. And I just think they're a deep team with a lot more interesting pieces now, and no guys anymore who just like take everything off the table when they come into the game. That would be. And I might say Golden State if I knew that Andrew Bogut and Curry were both ready to go, but I would place those 2 above Houston and Dallas right now. I think Dallas is in serious, serious trouble.
I agree. And also Dallas is a candidate that if it goes south coming out of the gate, they'll just do the 1997 Spurs. I think they're smart enough to do that. They'll gut it and try to use this as the 1 year to get a top 3 pick and rebuild a little bit. We didn't even talk about the Lakers. Big winners from the weekend, the Lakers. That's a team that was so young and athletic and frightening and scary and just rolled through them in the playoffs and really should have won all 5 games in that series. And now you just remove Harden from it completely. They have to be considered the favorite now. I mean, I can't even imagine picking Oklahoma City in a series against them now unless somebody was hurt. What do you think?
You could have just replaced. You could have said every single thing you just said about the Lakers, except 6 games instead of 5 games, and replaced Lakers with Spurs.
Oh yeah, good point.
They're the 2 winners, and in terms of stability, they're sort of polar opposites. We know exactly what the Spurs are, and it's just a question of can they stay healthy, and will the improvements from their young guys outweigh the declines from their old guys. The Lakers are a wild card because they're already not healthy, although I think Bobby's basically fine. And we don't know about their bench at all. And we got to see these guys mesh. But, even they've got the highest ceiling of any team outside Miami, and maybe a higher ceiling than Miami. So if you want to call them the favorites and the big winners of the weekend, it's hard to argue that. But I think I don't want to say that everyone forgets the Spurs, because Spurs fans whine about that all the time, and it's not actually true. But I do think people are starting to forget the Spurs a little bit.
We speaking of old, we should talk about the Celtics. We have different feelings about the ceiling of the 2013 Boston Celtics. I'm actually higher on them than you. I feel like they are a 2 seed. I think they're going to win the 2 seed comfortably by enough games that they will be resting people the last week and a half down the stretch. You disagree. Who do you have as the 2 seed?
I actually don't disagree.
You don't disagree? Oh.
No, I think, whether they're the 2 seed or the 3 seed or whatever, I think they are, with apologies to the Pacers, clearly the second best team in the Eastern Conference. And I don't actually think a lot of people around the NBA, and maybe even Kevin Pritchard, would argue about that if you sort of force the discussion upon them. I think they're the second best team in the Eastern Conference, clearly. It's just, and I will give you this. I have a little bit of the preseason giddiness in me from watching them, a little bit. It's very controlled, it's very limited, but they already look better offensively, especially, than I thought they would be. I need to see them. Their offense has been so bad for so many years now, and just getting worse and worse and worse. I need to see them for 30 games play average NBA offense before I start considering them a serious threat to beat Miami and this sort of newly formed Miami monster 4 times in 7 games. But the Celtics are, I think, going to be better than I initially thought, and are, as long as they play that defense, they're a dangerous team.
And Jeff Green, polarizing advanced metrics guy. The advanced metrics guy, they do not like Jeff Green. However, I thought he played the best I've ever seen him play in the preseason. Granted, it's preseason, but I do think there's a real chance that this life-threatening heart surgery he had and the chance of losing his career and all this stuff, it does seem like he's had some sort of a career epiphany. I've never seen him play more aggressive than he did in the preseason. It makes me wonder, do we just throw out what we saw before that surgery and maybe judge him by the new Jeff Green? What do you think?
Let me say this. I really don't like when people say advanced metrics guys don't like Jeff Green, because there is no metric anywhere that Jeff Green scores well in. Advanced, rudimentary, addition, subtraction.
Very fair point.
They are all bad. Okay? But context is everything in the NBA. You know what I mean? And the context in Oklahoma City, especially during his first couple of years, was one thing, and the context in Boston, both in his personal life and the players that are surrounding him and what he's going to be expected to do, are different. And he doesn't need to be an all-star. He doesn't need to have a PER above 18 or 19. He just needs to be helpful in just a general sense. And there's just no evidence that he's ever been a helpful NBA player. And so that's sort of where I am with the Celtics. I'm willing to believe that on this team, Jeff Green can be a helpful player. I'm willing to believe that this team can be a better than average offensive team, given how well they scored, towards the end of last season with Bradley in the starting lineup. I'm willing to believe all those things. I just got to see them, and until I see them, I'm going to be a skeptic.
I also think none of us realized how weighty the Rondo Ray Allen stuff was, and the fact that it's been a soap opera with these grenades being lobbed back and forth for the entire month. I think now we have a better idea of just maybe what was going on with this team last year offensively, and I don't know if you heard, but I had Scalabrini in the podcast last week, and he had a great breakdown of really what the problem was with Ray, and just that they needed Ray to be a decoy more than anything and just pull his guy, because you have to stay home with Ray in the corner or wherever he was, and that allowed the Celtics to play 4-on-4, and Ray wanted his touches and he wanted to run off screens, and they were always in this seesaw battle of making Ray happy versus doing what was better for the team. And it kind of, I never really thought about it, but it kind of made sense now looking back, thinking about all those times we'd be watching Rondo just pounding the ball 25 feet from the basket as Ray's running around these crazy screens, and then with 7 seconds left, all of a sudden Rondo has to decide, oh crap, I got to do something when he didn't get open. I do feel like they're just from a calibration standpoint in such better shape now, with the Jason Terry part, with even somebody like Sullinger who can get easy baskets. I am enthusiastic. Sounds like you're slightly enthusiastic.
I am slightly enthusiastic. Look, there is, again, preseason, whatever. And you didn't even mention Courtney Lee, who, there's just, the way I would put it watching Boston in the preseason is there's just, more zip on the court. There's just more dynamism. There's more guys who, if Courtney Lee gets a ball with 8 on the shot clock, he can run, a halfway decent pick and roll and advance the ball. They're just faster and more explosive. And I think that will make a difference. And as far as Ray, he complained publicly about, how over the weekend, I think, or maybe late last week, about how they only used him as a decoy and he wants to run the pick and roll more like he did in Seattle. And I wanted to say, A, there's enormous value in being a decoy. Yeah. Really powerful, enormous value. How do you not understand that? And B, how many pick and rolls are you going to run this year? I mean, it's not like he's going to be running the offense in Miami.
Well, you left out C. I think he just felt like he wasn't going to have touches. We watched the preseason game on Friday because we were doing the show. They posted him up once. There's a reason the Celtics didn't post up Ray Allen. Because it always worked out terribly. He's not a post-up player. He's a shooter. And it's that's who you are. You're 37 years old. You're a guy who hits shots when he's open. And if a team is running their entire offense around you, Ray Allen, they're going to win 25 games. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how he adjusts. But, to the Pacers for a second, it seems like Danny Granger's knee is really not good. And I thought that team got a little bit worse anyway. I didn't like the moves they made this summer. And if Granger's not healthy, that was the only team I was thinking maybe could sneak to the 3 spot, and instead it might go the other way. And then you look at Philly, which was the other team, you can make a case like Bynum goes there, has a huge FU season, averages a 25-13, and, becomes a franchise center. But his knee's hurt too. And we don't even know when we're going to see him this year. So it seems like you could cross them off too as a 50-win team. I just don't see another team other than Miami and Boston that could win 50 games in the East. Am I missing anybody?
No, I think you're underestimating Indiana a little bit. I think they can be a 50-win team, but you're right. The knee for Granger is a problem. George Hill didn't play the entire preseason. They've got to integrate an entirely new bench, which I think they'll do fine. I think they are going to be a very good team that can push 50. Philly, we just don't know until we see Bynum. And I don't think you can project 50 wins for either of the New York teams. I think they project as something like 44 to 48 wins, on the high end, maybe 50 if a million things go perfectly for them. No, I think the East is sort of middle heavy, but certainly not top heavy.
And you and I both like Atlanta a lot, and it seems like you and I like Atlanta, and John Hollinger, I'm throwing him into because he also likes them. I like them a lot. I actually have them as a 3 seed. Some people think that they're going to be a disaster, that Josh Smith's going to want to get traded, that he's going to poison them. What do you like about Atlanta?
I just think I think they can go 7 or 8 deep with really good, decent to very good NBA players, and they're fast. They have a lot of shooting, which they haven't had there in a while, or they've had okay shooting, but certainly not the shooting that they have now with Korver especially and Morrow especially. And people just, Al Horford went away for a year, and people just forgot how good Al Horford is.
Yeah.
And when you put Horford and Smith on the front line, you're just starting from such a position of strength that it's hard to be bad if you surround them with okay NBA perimeter talent. And they have better than okay NBA perimeter talent. I mean, they have some overlap issues. Defense and size, I think, are going to be problematic. But, they take a step back on defense. They should be better on offense. 3 may be high, but, there were people who were like, oh, that's a lottery team. And I just don't see that at all.
And you didn't even mention Lou Williams, who, I don't know. I think on that team, they're going to really need him to do the stuff that Lou Williams does. And Lou Williams is one of those sneaky good guys that, you never even really think about him until you're playing him in a 7-game playoff series and you're terrified every time he has the ball. I like that team. I think they have an identity now, this post Joe Johnson. Here comes Danny Ferry. We finally have somebody who's smart and who's doing things that make sense in a logical, big picture way. Like all that stuff kind of ties into a larger picture, and I don't know. I just like that team. Any other sleepers that you like?
For teams, sleepers. No, I mean I think the Eastern Conference is what it is. Toronto is the team I think that could make some noise in pushing for the 8th seed, especially if Valanciunas is as good as he has looked for stretches of the preseason.
Yeah.
I think Toronto will be better than people think. I'm a huge Kyle Lowry and Dwayne Casey guy, so maybe that explains it. In the West, no real sleepers. But Utah to me is a borderline playoff lock that people have in that sort of 8th seed conversation that we were having earlier. That Utah to me is above those teams. They have some potential to make a move during the season that could change that in either direction. But I think Utah is going to be a solid team. That could, if Utah, Memphis, Utah Clippers, that could be a problematic series for one of those teams in the first round.
I agree on Toronto. I think they're over under. I think it was 33 wins. I'm going way over on that. I think they're in the high 30s. I agree on Utah. I was very impressed watching them in the preseason because they just have professional basketball players. Like you just go down the line. Their top 9 are all professional guys who aren't going to embarrass you if they're on the court. The only team, if you're looking for a robo sleeper, I do like this Pistons team. I think they're going to be fun. I think and I'm in the minority on this, but they got young big guys who can run the floor and do stuff. They have shooters. They have glue guys. And they didn't finish the year that bad last year. I think they were like 500 for the last 40 games or something. And
they started 4-20 and finished 500 after that.
And it really seems like the Drummond thing. Like if you're a Cleveland Cavaliers fan, the Drummond thing is a borderline disaster already, right?
Especially after the Valanciunas thing.
Yeah, like you basically back-to-back years you passed on 2 potential all-star big guys. For 2 guys that I don't think will ever make an all-star team. And that, you have Irving and we both think Irving is the best candidate to make the leap this year, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's not far from making it. You know what I mean? But we got to see it over an extended season. But he's a star.
And Klay Thompson would be number 2 choice on that list for me.
Klay Thompson is going to average 18 points a game this year, I think.
Yeah. And then other than that, I mean, a Sheik, I think, if you're talking about fantasy sleepers, those would be my top 3. Zach Lowe, go prepare for the hurricane. You wrote a really good column today about the Harden trade on Grantland. Tomorrow you have another piece coming out about another principal on one of the 2 teams involved. I won't spoil it. Good luck surviving everything, and I hope you get to see opening night. I hope you have television.
Yeah, me too. All right, man. Thanks.
All right.
Happy birthday, Barry, to you. It's the Subway Surprise Birthday Party. And to celebrate, Subway is baking up a fresh new cookie with real cranberries, blueberries, and sweet white chips. It's the new Birthday Berry Cookie. Try it today and all September long. Subway. Eat fresh.
All right, this is exciting. Bob Voulgaris, professional sports bettor, on the phone right now. He disagreed with some of the over-unders that House and I discussed. But first, we want to talk about the Harden trade. You have a team of 5,000 people working, crunching numbers for you so you can figure out what's going on in the wonderful world of basketball. What did your numbers say about Oklahoma City losing James Harden?
In terms of wins, just like a raw number, probably 3 to 4 wins worse than they were last year, or what they projected to be this year, I guess would be a better way of putting it.
And what about title chances?
I think it makes it a lot more difficult for them. I mean, Harden was awesome for them against San Antonio. He played really good against the Lakers. He's a good defender. I think the problem they'll have is they'll be forced to play a really, really worse offensive player in Cephalosha, or be forced to stick with their big lineup, which is what they kind of did against Miami, which didn't really work.
Yeah, you almost had a heart attack on Twitter about that.
Yeah, I didn't like it at all. I just didn't understand. It was. I used the word obdurate, and it seemed like that's kind of what they were. That kind of personified the way Brooks was thinking. They just were very hard in the way they decided to do things. They didn't want to change anything at all. And when you have like Battier and all these guys having wide open 3-point shots like every single time down the court because your big refuses to make it all the way out to the 3-point line, you might want to say, hey, wait a minute, maybe we should change what we're doing here. But they didn't, and they lost. and now they got rid of arguably their second best offensive player.
And that's one of the things you like to measure is lineups against other lineups and 5-man lineups and stuff like that. And all your data was telling you you do not want to go big against this Miami team. And yet Oklahoma City just kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And now it seems like they're kind of pushing the chips back in the table this year because now they don't have Harden. So it's probably the best way for them to win to have the big guys. So
I suppose, yeah, but it's difficult because they lose a lot in him. They lose a guy who scores a lot of his points in the paint, gets to the free throw line a lot, and he's really efficient on offense, and he's also a great three-point shooter. I don't know that they'll be able to make up with that. Well, they definitely won't be able to make up with that with what they picked up in the trade.
Yeah.
But whether or not they'll be able to find different ways to score, I guess, is another story altogether.
Were you surprised that Harden was such a polarizing figure over these last few days about whether he was worth a max deal, and people kept pointing to the fact that he wasn't good in the 2012 finals and all this stuff? Like,
I think that's the problem with the problem is that a lot of people really only watch the finals. Like even some of these national writers, they watch the playoffs and they watch the regular season, but they really, really focus on the finals. You know, that's when they get the chance to travel down and watch the games in person. And he did have a tough time in the finals, but he also had to guard LeBron almost every time he was on the floor, which isn't really that easy. But I mean, he's 23 years old. I mean, he's young. He's good. He's definitely, if he's not worth a max contract, there aren't very many players in the NBA that are worth a max contract. That's for sure. Which is maybe a different topic.
Yeah, well, there's two different topics there. One is that, yeah, he wasn't that good in the Miami finals. He's going against somebody who's playing at a level that we hadn't seen in 20 years. I think he got a little psyched out. I think he's only been in the league for 3 years. That was a really big stage. He had a lot of pressure on him just because he was always the guy who, was the security blanket for them anytime Westbrook ever went into a funk. And he also didn't get a lot of minutes in game one, and it seemed like that affected him a little bit from a confidence standpoint. I mean, if that's your case for trading him, that's ridiculous. And I was saying to somebody this weekend, who had a terrible finals in his third year? James Worthy. In the 1984 finals, James Worthy was terrible. James Worthy threw away what should have been the game-clinching possession in Game 2. He threw a pass right to Gerald Henderson, who stole it and got a layup. You didn't hear the Lakers saying after that finals, like, we got to get rid of James Worthy. Right. Or James Worthy just doesn't have the chops to play at this level. I mean, it's an inane argument. You're not the player you're going to be until, like, year 7 or 8. Look at LeBron. Took LeBron 9 years to hit that level that he hit. So if that's your argument, it's stupid.
Yeah, players peak at that position around 27 years of age, and he's got 4 years before he gets there. So yeah, it is, of course, foolish. But they made a decision. They made the decision when they initially decided to extend Westbrook. They kind of decided that Westbrook was the guy. Because, I don't think James Harden was going to play. There's not many players. I think Ginobili's like the only player who's decided, okay, I'm happy being a sixth man for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
So I think when they signed Westbrook, they kind of made the decision that they were going to go with him. And then, of course, when they re-signed Ibaka, then the writing was on the wall. So it just became really, really difficult for them to keep all four guys, I guess. But I would have for sure kept them for another year, and then decided after the season was over what I was going to do, because you just have they don't. I mean, maybe they do realize, but you don't know how difficult it is. I mean, the Spurs have been great for a long time, and they haven't won that many championships. It's just tough to get there, and you have a team that's really, really good right now. And it seems like maybe part of the thinking was, well, the Lakers just stack their roster, and maybe we can just wait things out and get some more young players, and then regroup by the time all our guys are 27. The Lakers are all in retirement. And maybe that's what they were thinking, but I don't know. I'm not sure.
Reading between the lines of your Twitter posts, it seemed like you would have rather paid Harden 4 years, $60 than Westbrook what they were paying him. Do you like Harden more than Westbrook?
I do. It's tricky because when I watch the games, I think Westbrook is awesome. When I watch the games, I mean, he just looks like such a freak. But none of the data really bears it out. Like none of the stuff we're doing. I mean, almost everything I do is data driven for the most part. Like at least step 1, 2, 3 is data, and then my subjective stuff adds in after that. And there isn't any data at all that backs up Russell Westbrook is a better player than James Harden. Like none whatsoever. So I do like James Harden better. Russell
That's
Westbrook.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Russell Westbrook, if you look at any of the, he's not a better defensive player and he's not a better offensive player. He just isn't. So I don't know. I mean, but then you watch the games and you see him and he looks like nobody can guard him. So I don't know. Maybe it's a case of the data being wrong in some ways. I'm not sure.
Could you explain to America exactly how you chart all this stuff? How many people are involved?
It's we do a lot of charting, but we also just do a better job of taking the available data that's out there and dealing with it. I think that's a lot of it is that. I mean, we do have a lot of proprietary data that nobody else has, but then for the available data that's out there, I think we just have to do a better job of analyzing it. At one point we had about 15 people charting data for us, getting paid per clip to chart data. At one point, we've scaled that back a lot because we found that after we spent a couple of years charting data, we were able to now take what we charted and infer upon the publicly available data and see what was actually important from that. So we'd be able to spend less money charting and more and focus more on the publicly available data. But it's a pretty big operation. I mean, I've got full-time programmers. I've got a math guy who originally worked for me, who was a quant on Wall Street, now works for me, and he's now a partner. And then we've got like a bunch of other people doing various data-related tasks.
And a few years ago, is before a lot of this data became public, you were doing this stuff and nobody even kind of knew it was going on except for the basketball diehards. Now a lot of it seems to be public, so I'm sure that made your job easier. But what was your biggest advantage maybe 6-7 years ago with the data?
6-7 years ago, I think the biggest advantage was the fact that I probably didn't focus that much on data, to be honest. I did a lot of subjective stuff 6-7 years ago. I didn't really start using a lot of data and more of a model-driven approach until like 2009, 2010. And then at that point, I guess at that point we just had a better understanding of how to use it. So there's like a lot of people who talk about stuff like plus minus and this and that on the internet, but they don't really understand sampling sizes, like how much actual amount of games you need for stuff to be statistically significant.
Yeah.
I think that's like our number one advantage is like someone posted today, the guy who used to work for the Mavericks, Wayne Winston, posted something on Twitter yesterday that Kevin Martin was, I think it might have been 15 points worse than an average, or some number worse than an average. Maybe it was 8 points worse than an average defender, which is like, I mean, I'm pretty sure you could wear shorts and some sneakers and not be 8 points worse than that. I mean, he just made like a really ridiculous assessment of the situation.
Yeah.
Using a very, very small bit of data. And I think our advantage is we really understand that there's a lot of variance in the actual data, and you have to really, really smooth it out a little bit and make sure that you're using a big enough sample.
Well, in fairness to me, I am hitting the 20-footer right now as well as I've hit it since I was in college. And
right, but can you defend? You could probably
I can't defend.
No, well, see, that's the problem. That he was saying that Kevin Martin was like 10 points worse than an average defender or something like that. Some number. Whatever it was really high. I mean, the worst defender in the league is only about 6 or 7 points worse than replacement level. And that's
right.
The very, very, very worst defender.
Well, a lot of the stuff you were keeping track of, you know, you became, the first time I ever heard about you was after the Donaghy stuff, and you were keeping track of all these different official things, NBA official stuff, that I never even knew people were keeping track of, and the numbers were kind of amazing. And what's even more amazing now is even post Donaghy, there's still metrics that clearly point to certain results happening if certain refs are in certain situations. Some refs favor home teams more. Some refs like being on the road. Some refs call more fouls than others. Like, are you surprised that this really hasn't changed?
Yeah, I'm a little bit surprised. I mean, to be honest, we don't use any of that ref stuff. Like, the Donaghy stuff I did was just my own morbid fascination with the fact that there was a referee fixing games I was betting on, and I just kind of wanted to get to the bottom of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's like the famous, I don't know, someone mentioned that some referee is like really good for the away team, and there's that. But the thing is, these referees are only reffing 40 games a year, and it's difficult to really, I'm sure you can do against the spreads type stats for refs, but I think when we looked at the stuff in the very beginning in like the early 2000s, we found that there wasn't really a year-to-year correlation between what you found from years 1 and 2 to years 3 and 4. But yeah, no, I definitely spent a lot of time like watching and charting every Donaghy game from 2006 to 2000 or 2005 to 2007, just because I couldn't believe that this guy was, communicating. That was the official party line: communicating with gamblers, not fixing games, because they found that he didn't fix games. He was just communicating with gamblers. I just kind of wanted to get to the bottom of it and come up with my own findings on the matter.
So what do you think, over the last your experience gambling, what is the number one thing you've learned that you could pass along to the fledgling gamblers out there?
It's tough to win. I guess that'd be the number one thing. The thing is, you got to look at defense. Everyone focuses on offense and which players are doing a good job on offense and which players look exciting, but you really have to watch like off the ball defense. Like Eric Bledsoe, we were talking about this on Twitter, about how great he was playing. In the next game, he got like 9 steals, but he still in that game where he got 9 steals, he let his guy he was defending have like 2 wide open 3-pointers in like a 45-second span, because he just sags off the ball and was not paying attention off the ball. So the casual fan will watch the game and be like, oh my God, Eric Bledsoe's the best defender ever. And I do think he has the capability to be the best defensive point guard in the league. Yeah. But he's just so bad off the ball when his guy doesn't have the ball, and he cheats so much that it almost negates everything good he does when his guy has the ball. So that would be the thing I would pay attention to, what teams are doing a really good job of defending as a unit, all points of the court, not just who has the ball. And to train yourself to watch off the ball more than on the ball.
I have the similar frustration with Rondo, because Rondo is somebody that I think people feel like is this transcendent defensive player because he's so good at like jumping into passing lanes and he's such a phenomenal athlete. But you can kind of beat him off the dribble. You can do some stuff to Rondo. He's certainly not the shutdown defensive player. Like you watch Courtney Lee, and you're not beating Courtney Lee off the dribble. You're just not. Or you watch somebody like Chuck Hayes.
Right.
Dwight Howard, I went to an exhibition game, and Dwight Howard tried to post up Chuck Hayes twice, and it embarrassed himself.
Yeah,
there's certain guys that are just really good at, you're not scoring on me. It's not happening.
Yeah, Avery Bradley's a good example of that. He just he's good at ball denial.
Yeah.
His guys don't get the ball. So forget about how good he defends when they have the ball, which is a pretty good job. His guys just don't even get the ball because he's like in their shirt the entire time.
And I forgot to talk. We had Zach Lowe on before you were talking about the Celtics. I forgot to mention how I really think the Celtics could be fantastic defensively. Because if Bradley comes back, and only like really the junkies know how good Bradley is defensively.
Yeah, he's really good.
You put Bradley and Courtney Lee out together with Garnett, and the way Jeff Green was playing the small forward in the preseason, I'm a little bit of a leap of faith there, but could really be good defensively with those 4 guys out in the court at the same time. Those 4 guys could be flying around. Then maybe you could even go 3 guard with Rondo as the 5th. But I do think they have options.
They're the second best team in the East for sure. I think that's pretty apparent at this point. I mean, Chicago with Derrick Rose is obviously great, but he's going to be gone until January, February, and who knows how good he'll be when he comes back.
Or who knows if he comes back. I'm still not sold that we see him this year. I mean,
I'm not sure I would play him. What is the
I don't think they want to. Yeah,
what would be the upside? So that you can have him for the playoffs, so you can face Miami in the playoffs or some other team in the playoffs. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of upside in that.
Or maybe you go the other way and maybe you
rest
kind
them
of try to bottom out this year.
Well, I would just maybe just let them rest, get healthy. Maybe you pick up a lottery pick or something like that. I don't know. It might not be bad. Could be worse. Worse things could happen.
Joe House and I, two of the noted NBA thinkers in the history of mankind, did our Over Under podcast, and you disagreed with a couple of them. What did you disagree with?
I actually found myself agreeing with a lot. I don't know if that's a byproduct of you following me on Twitter or what, but I actually agreed with a lot of your things. There's a couple things that I disagreed with. Let me grab my list here. Well, the one that I really disagreed with was you had New Orleans over, not so much over, but you thought they'd win like 37 games.
Yeah.
Which is just like, I don't see how they could get to over that number or around that number.
But that was a pure Anthony Davis Kool-Aid pick, and I was vindicated on Friday night when he ran amok against the Miami Heat, and I was feeling good about my over.
Yeah, it's going to be tough for them. I just think that they might win 30, but over 31 seems like a stretch. There.
Well, you're a big Ryan Anderson fan.
I like Ryan Anderson a lot. He's like, I would love. I'm not a Laker fan, but if I were the Lakers, I would find a way to get Ryan Anderson on that team. And if it meant giving up Pau Gasol, I'd be like, okay, see you later, Pau. Take Ryan Anderson. Not because I think Ryan Anderson is a better player than Pau Gasol. I just think he's a better fit with Dwight Howard than Pau Gasol is. So before everyone freaks out and tells me that Ryan Anderson.
That would be a really interesting trade. So New Orleans would have to throw in another salary, but
yeah, it would be tough to do just because there's different age and salaries to make up for. But yeah, they need that type of player on that team, and Antoine Jameson isn't that type of player. So I did disagree with that. And then the Portland one, I disagreed with. You really liked Portland over, I think.
You know why? Because I couldn't find an 8th playoff team, and now I'd like to abandon that pick. I'm going with Houston. I have Houston now as my 8th playoff team, so I'm flipping. I'm turning my back on the Portland over. I'm shunning it.
You're shunning that one.
Yeah, I'm shunning that, and I'm going Houston. And the amazing thing was the Houston over-under stayed 29 for like 24 hours after that trade online, and then they finally realized it was stupid.
What did they move it to? I don't pay attention to season win totals for a couple of reasons.
I think they moved it to the mid-30s, somewhere like 33, something like that. But
they have a chance to be an 8 seed. I think that they're probably not done dealing. Maybe I think they'll probably pick up another player or two as the season progresses. They just don't have a power forward. That's their problem. They don't have any scoring in the front court. That's their main problem.
Right.
Like they got a great defensive center in Ashik, but then they have like Patrick Patterson, I guess, as their power forward, and then that's it. So that's like really where they struggle a lot.
What does your system say about the 2013 NBA champion? Which I'm sure you have simulated the season about 50 million times.
Yeah, I simmed it. Yeah, I think I went crazy for Miami 3 years ago or 2 when they first picked up those players and said that it was like pretty much over for the rest of the league. And I'm kind of staying with that. I think that Miami is pretty much the team to beat. The greatest bet of all time was this year's bet that you could have made at the start of maybe like 3 or 4 weeks ago. You could have bet Miami to win the East at like pick when the line came out. And that was like, I would have bet. You couldn't bet a lot of money, but that's like something where I would have bet a lot of money. You're basically just betting on a LeBron James injury. That's all you're betting on. That's the only thing you have to worry about is a LeBron James injury because it was like a joke. I thought that line was bad. So I think Miami is the best. I'm just really intrigued with how that matchup will be. Let's say they do play the Lakers in the finals. Which team will shake first? Which team will decide to break what they're doing and either go small or go big if you're Miami? Because if it's small versus big, that's going to be the most interesting. It'll just be, it'll be a bloodbath in the paint for Miami, and then what will Miami will just get slaughtered. But then how will the Lakers defend Miami in the open court? It'll be interesting. So that would be, to me, the most exciting finals in some time, although people thought the Oklahoma City-Miami finals was going to be exciting too, and it didn't turn out to be that exciting.
Yeah, we were watching, was doing TV with Jalen and Wilbon on Friday, and Jalen was really down on Miami. He just thinks they're too small, and he thought they were too old on the wings. He's not sure that they were better this year than they were last year. And when you think how the Lakers, with the Howard Gasol, like just seeing those guys, I don't know if you've seen them in person yet, but when you see that team in person and how big those two guys are, I know LeBron is playing out of his mind right now, but man, I just don't know how you're going to compete with that with Chris Bosh and Rashard Lewis.
Well, they'll be playing LeBron at the power forward. LeBron can guard Powell, but now can Chris Bosh guard Dwight Howard? You know what the key to that finals is? If let's say Miami does want to play small, they need to play so fast for a bunch of reasons. One, they've got more depth than the Lakers, and they're going to be drawing a lot. They need to be able to get the Lakers players in foul trouble.
Yep.
Because the Lakers have no depth whatsoever. And the easiest way to make sure a team in the playoffs has to go deeper is to play at a faster speed and increase the number of possessions. So it'll be really interesting. I think that Miami is better this year just because they figured out what they're supposed to do, which they didn't know last year at the start of the season. And now they're going to have a whole season of knowing exactly how they want to play. And the Lakers are really the only team that has bigs that you're worried about. Are you really going to be worried about the 76ers and Bynum? Of course not. So it's that small, too small and too old on the wings. I don't think that that's necessarily. They're old on the wings, but they've got so much athleticism in LeBron and Wade and even Bosh to make up for it that I don't think it's really an issue. I really don't.
Yeah, I want to amend my statement. I don't think from a talent standpoint they're as good, but I think their top three is in the best shape that it's probably ever been. And as you said, like their team is now falling into place with LeBron playing power forward.
Yeah, they know what to do. Whereas
they know what they are.
The first year when they played Boston, the first game of the regular season, and Boston beat them, the first year they had the big three, they had no clue what they wanted to do at the end of games or in the or at all. Like, they just had no idea. You could see they were just passing the ball back and forth, and it would be, okay, Dwayne Wade would have the ball in isolation, and then the next possession they'd give it to LeBron, and he'd do something in isolation. Now they actually know what they want to do, which is space the floor and kick it open to wide-open three-point shooters or have driving lanes for those two guys to slash. So it's a big difference.
I remember writing a column like early April about identity and how I just felt like Miami had no idea what they were.
Yeah,
and now I feel like they have 100% idea what they are now. I don't know if they have the right complementary players to execute it, but they know what they are. And also the things that they're going to need if say Mike Miller breaks down or Rashard Lewis is washed up, which I think he is, like that's the easiest position in basketball to replace during the season. You can always find wing guys who can shoot.
Yeah, of course.
So from that standpoint, it'll be easy for him.
And you're a Celtics fan. I mean, how many wide-open three-point shots has Ray Allen had in the last 3 years? I mean, he doesn't get that many. He gets all his baskets coming off of screens.
Yeah,
and he has to work so hard. And he's just gonna have to plant himself in the corner and just wait. And he's gonna have wide-open shots. I mean, he's older, yes, but I think he's gonna have the easiest time of his life playing on this team. People don't realize how good LeBron is. They see how good he is, but they don't realize how much better he makes his players. I mean, I was watching his last game as a Cavalier versus the Celtics that year, and I was looking at the players. He had like Mo Williams, Jamario Moon,
Shaq,
Anthony Parks,
old Shaq, washed up Shaq.
It was just a joke, and people were like, and Delonte West was on. I mean, just a bunch of none of those players that were any good then, and let alone now they're terrible. And I mean, now he's got like an embarrassment of great players playing with him. I don't know. I just think it's over for the rest of the league. I think the Lakers have a chance to beat him in the finals because they're just so big and they're just so odd. They're oddly big that it's going to be really, really interesting. But aside from that, I don't think any team. I mean, Oklahoma City obviously has a decent team. Who really benefited from this trade? We kind of got away from this. Is the Spurs. That's who really benefited from this trade. I mean, they must just be loving this. They had so much trouble defending Harden in the Western Conference Finals. And Harden did like a great job on Ginobili. That I think the Spurs might. I mean, I think the Spurs can actually beat the Lakers, but I didn't think they could beat Oklahoma City before the trade. Now I think they can beat the Lakers and they can beat Oklahoma City. And they might not be the best of those three teams, but they just happen to match up decently against both of them. So I think they're a team that actually might be able to come out of the West.
And you talked about supporting cast guys, and can you believe those guys were out on the floor? Like, I kind of feel that way about the Celtics last year. Look at some of the guys that played big minutes for them last year in the playoffs. Michael Pietrus, Keon Dooling, Ryan Hollins, Marquise Daniels.
But they didn't really replace those players. I mean, they got Jason Terry. They're still really thin at the.
Well, eventually though they will. Like, because Courtney Lee and Avery Bradley, and also Jeff Green and Sullinger are all going to be getting the minutes that went to probably four of the worst guys who played in the playoffs last year, more than 5 minutes a game.
Yeah, they do have to get another big, though. I mean, I love Garnett at the 5, but they need someone else to play. You know, Garnett and Bass are good, but then when those guys go out, the drop-off is pretty extreme.
I agree. That's why we're going to bring Bill Russell out of retirement. He's going to come back for one more year. Last thing. Do you want to pour out a 40 for the greatest gambling run of your life, the first month post-lockout, last NBA season?
Do I want to what? I'm sorry?
Pour out a 40? Say some last
that was
words.
A good run. I was sending you some of the stuff at the end just to kind of let you, we were keeping in touch. But yeah, that was a very good run. I don't know. I do want to pour out a 40. I enjoyed lockout basketball. I think I was one of the few people who actually enjoyed it. I couldn't breathe the entire season because it was just game after game after game.
Yeah.
But I did enjoy lockout basketball. I'm looking forward to the next lockout.
Well, you had what was it? You liked the unders because the overs were just too high for the first month because the teams were too tired, right?
Yeah, I think we went on like a ridiculous 3-week run where I think we bet like 80% unders or something like that. And I was waiting for them to figure out that the lines were too high, but they didn't. I mean, because the data didn't look, if you looked at the data, I mean, our simulation program did not like under. It liked over. But if you're watching the games, you could see like these players dribbling the ball off their knees out of bounds and huffing and puffing after like a minute and a half. It just seemed like under was the ticket. This year is going to be interesting because we have a year's worth of lockout data now. You have to account for that.
Right.
So. Well,
you can look forward to seeing this in our 30 for 30 film about Bob's lockout gambling. Very exciting. And when I tweet the link for this podcast, we will have your
correct
your
name.
Twitter name on there so people can follow you during the season as you flip out when coaches play the wrong matchups and stuff. We'll talk to you during the season. Thanks for the time.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
All right.
Bill, can I get a quick promo for this one?
Yeah.
Ready.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons. We talked about the James Harden trade on the BS Report today. Grantland Zach Lowe came on and we broke it down. And then we talked to professional sports gambler Bob Voulgaris, who broke down the data about the trade. You can check that out on iTunes, Grantland.com, or ESPN.com's Pod Center.
So I get to sign off. Whoa!
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
Geico presents Strange Savings Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.